Fabulous. Well, good morning. Happy Friday.
Good morning.
Let me do some quick housekeeping. We are here at the Fridaily Writing Pep Talk, which is a service that I offer through Find the Words, a writing coaching service. My name is MJ. I use he, him, his, and I'm a writing coach who helps founders, job seekers, and anybody with great ideas to express themselves authentically in professional scenarios. And I do this every week. It is on Fridays at 9 a.m. Pacific. And every week I feature a different guest who has one very specific question. And then I try to turn it into a lesson that can be sort of universally applicable. And today we are joined by Morgan from Bragg and Wright. Morgan is a salary advisor. Morgan, welcome. Thank you for all of the work that you do helping femmes and thems make more money. Can you tell us a little bit more about Bragg and Wright and what inspired you to create that business?
Hey MJ, thrilled to be here. Yes, happy to share a little bit more about why I got started. So I have a background in professional compensation. I actually worked in product management at a SaaS software company or SaaS pay structure software company for about 3 years. And while there, I learned how pay works and your place as an employee within the grander pay structure and how businesses determine the value of any particular job. After my time there, I went on to new opportunities, but at that opportunity decided that it wasn't the right opportunity for me, and I actually got pipped at the end of 2022. My boss came to me at the time and said, you know, you've only been here for 4 months, but we think that you've never accomplished a goal, and you can either take 6 weeks of severance now, or you can design a PIP, and then we'll decide whether or not you met the qualifications of that PIP, and then you get nothing at the end. So deciding to take my sanity in mind, I took the 6 weeks of cash up front and walked and was like, holy crap, what do I do with myself now? And what I was doing with myself was being filled with rage. I was so angry, not just at this kind of straw that broke the camel's back moment, but every moment that I had had throughout my career where I had been gaslit, underpaid, watched, frankly, men who had less experience, less education, be paid higher than me, be promoted more quickly than me. And I said, this is it, I'm done. Somebody has to make a change, and I guess it's going to be me. So I now support clients in pay negotiation, in career advancement, and just generally surviving the capitalist hellscape that is operating within a tech job or really any kind of job these days. So that's a little bit about me and Bragg and Wright.
Thanks for sharing that. It's it's really inspiring to hear how you have married your attention to systemic bullshit and your personal story and have created a business that is attentive both to the global concerns that you're paying attention to and also the very unique and personal circumstances of each person that you're working with. It's really inspiring, and I'm so glad that you're doing that work. Um,
Thank you.
and I'm glad that you used the word rage. I'm looking forward to talking, well, not looking forward, but I'm anticipating talking a little bit about that rage and how it can be used as a kind of fuel as you're creating content and um, magnetizing the types of people who probably experience the same kind of rage, and you're going to help them channel that rage and make more money. I think that's great.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Let's get into it. So here's a warm-up question for the folks watching the recording. Um, what aspect of your work or industry gets you fired up enough to say things that other people might find inappropriate or untactful? And I'm going to invite you to write this on a piece of paper because we're going to come back to this a little bit later.
Okay.
Um,
Can you repeat the question for me?
of course, what aspect of your work or industry gets you fired up enough to say things that other people might find inappropriate or untactful?
Mm.
I'm going to go on mute for 1 minute and then we'll come back and talk a little bit more.
Okay.
Go ahead and wrap up your last thought and we'll come back in just a couple seconds.
Beautiful. Let's do it.
Morgan, can you tell me a little bit about some of the things that get you fired up?
Yeah, this is actually a really interesting question for me because, and one that really shapes the evolution of my business and some of the struggles that I've had because I have like a lot of rage in person, and like I think that comes off I have a very strong personality, and that comes off in person.
Mm.
I've had a really hard time um projecting that into the written sphere, into the public sphere, into the places where my former colleagues and my college friends and the people who know a version of Morgan can see. And so when it comes to the kinds of things that get me really activated, it's systemic inequality. It is the knowledge that if we continue to behave in the same way, then our outcomes are going to continue to be the same. And I think that's especially true when it comes to negotiation for employees. When women in particular continue to accept the first offer and fail to negotiate for themselves, then they're going to continue getting the same results. And coming on the heels of a pandemic where women's inequality was actually increased, where we saw almost well, not even almost, a majority of women impacted by layoffs in departments like recruiting, marketing, sales, UX. These were all really like women heavy organizations that have faced the brunt of layoffs over the last couple of years. And so those women are now out searching for jobs, and they're going to take like studies show that they're more likely to take salaries at a lower rate just to be able to get work. So we're actually seeing the salary gap increase, the wage gap increase, rather than decrease, which is how it had been trending for so many years. So I think that this is the time to be paying attention, and that is really what makes me like scared for the future. And now I'm like shaking my fist. I'm like on my soapbox officially, and it really gets me energized to say like, the buck stops here, as the saying goes. And you know, we have to advocate for ourselves because no one else is going to.
Morgan, I'm assuming that you are not reading from a teleprompter right now.
No.
You are speaking off the cuff. You are speaking very clearly. You're sharing very specific details. So to me, it seems that you have no problem expressing yourself about these things. So I'm curious about what are the obstacles that are making it more difficult than you want it to be to turn this into written or video content?
Yeah. Training and fear are really the two things that have stood out for me as far as my difficulties, because I am a trained technical writer. You know, I did both my undergrad and master's degree in technical communication, and the mentality behind technical documentation, which I love dearly, is to remove the self entirely from it. The goal is to not have yourself be a part of it and to be explicitly informative. And that's where I find a lot of my writing, whether that's my blog writing or my social media posts, lean almost, they can start to feel like a thesis, really, that I have this educational background, and I think it's been a real challenge for me to disengage from that technical mindset of just delivering pure information and inserting emotion back into it. So that has been half of it, and then the other half has just been kind of this hesitancy around labeling myself as an out and out like raging feminist, here to like shake her fist about pay. That's a very specific kind of person, and certainly not the kind of like, is it the kind of person that like baby Morgan in Missouri like thought she was going to be? Like, yes, the answer is yes. But evolving into that person, when you've spent your career trying to be respected by your peers, especially for me, I've gotten notes from bosses in the past that I can be intense or that I need to like lay off or back up. Having all of that in my brain, makes it really scary in this moment of creating this business to say like, actually that's my power, and being intense and being too much and shaking my fist and being filled with rage, those are all the things that are going to draw people to me, whereas and now I'm like,
Wow.
on purpose. Felt very appropriate. And those are all the things that are going to draw people to me now as a business owner, whereas in the workplace they were sometimes felt like my weaknesses.
I would imagine that so many women and so many queer people are going to be nodding their heads, vociferously agreeing with what you're saying, because at the same moment that so many queer people, and I can only speak myself, come into our authentic selves, so many people are saying like, oh, but you were so nice and polite, and now you're saying all these political things, and what happened to that sweet little boy or that sweet little girl who used to follow all the rules? But you're right, that is a source of power and will turn people off.
Yeah.
Which in some ways can be a good thing, because I think in order to turn people on, you have to turn some other people off. I want to talk a little bit more about some of the other pain points that I hear people, including you in our last conversation, but I hear a lot of people talking about. Where's my screen share? The big green button. All right. So some of the other pain points that I hear folks talk about is when it comes to something that gets you really excited, it can be really exciting in the moment to have all this energy about this idea, and then a new thing happens and we've forgotten about the thing that we were upset about before, and we're occupied by this other passion of ours, and we haven't had enough time to become lucid enough about the thing that we were upset about to sit down and write something about it. Another obstacle that folks will talk about is you want to create some kind of content strategy, which involves creating a plan so that you know that you have stuff that you want to write about at some point in the future. And last time we talked, Morgan, you graciously shared a list of themes that will keep you busy for the next year. But then new things will happen. An election goes a way that we didn't expect it to, or there's a big event that happens globally or nationally that requires our attention and requires us to to respond and to say something because we know that our audience expects us to weigh in about that thing.
Yeah.
And then the other obstacle that tends to come up is even if an idea is very, very good, it can feel both like too much and not enough to create content about. And let me clarify what I mean by that. It can feel like too much if the theme is something like salary negotiation, which is so complex and there are so many layers to it that if you were to try and write in your words a thesis about it, you wouldn't be able to do that well in something that is bite-sized for social media, for example. And then it can also feel like not enough when you're trying to fill out a whole year's worth of content and you want everything that you write to be about something important to you. But if you're constantly trying to come up with new things, that can get exhausting because then you're spending too much of your time scratching your head trying to come up with ideas. Are there any other themes here that I haven't touched on that you want to add into our empty box here?
No, I think that these are very strong themes. So let's stick here.
Great. So then I have some recommended approaches that might help some of these become a little bit more manageable. The first is to create a personal routine for personal expression. And that's not a typo that I've included the word personal twice, because I think the routine has to be personal to you. And so you in particular, Morgan, you have what seems to me a level of comfort talking directly to people about the things that you are passionate about. Now, I've never been with you when you've been by yourself with a legal pad, but perhaps sitting down to try and write content by hand isn't the best approach for you to develop your ideas. And instead, you might be served by developing a routine that puts you in touch with another person. And that can be the raw material for the development of your idea or the content that you're developing. Other folks who might be watching this might be creatures of habit. That describes me. I wake up every morning, I make a mug of green tea, and I sit down with my legal pad before I've woken up, and I write 3 pages by hand first thing in the morning. Other folks are motivated by reward or by whatever that program is that donates to someone that you don't like if you don't do this thing that you say that you do. Whatever works for you, the routine should be personal.
Yeah, I love this. And I actually have a calendar hold on my calendar every morning at 8 a.m. that says "Right, bitch." And
Yes,
that has been somewhat helpful for me whenever I actually commit to it. But to your point of creating accountability, that has been one way that I've found success of getting content out the door is partnering with somebody and having that accountability together.
totally, totally. I think working with other people can be good for accountability. And it's also really good for focus, especially a lot of folks that I work with who live with ADD or ADHD might find it easier to find their energy directed by a person who is prompting them and asking follow-up questions and keeping them on their toes as they're expressing themselves. So lots of different ways to do that. When news happens, it can be helpful to hold on to your plan for content with a bit of looseness. So, Morgan, I love the list of topics that you have, and I would encourage you to have, let's say, a non-monogamous relationship to those topics, and to know that they are there if 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 nothing earth-shattering happens between now and then, you have something to write about. So you have that sense of security. And I would encourage other folks to take a page out of your book and to do something similar. But to hold loosely to that. And then finally, when it comes to these big overarching themes, I like to think of a theme as juicy as that as good fodder for a cycle of content. And you can create your content strategy in a way that draws various types of content from that theme so that you can come at that theme from a couple different angles. So for you, Morgan, you have strongly held opinions. And so an opinion piece would be a great thing to lead at the outset of introducing a theme. But I also hear you wanting to ground your work in your personal experience, your personal history, as well as usable advice for your clients and your prospective clients. And so if you develop a content strategy that plans to result in one of each of those types of content for each theme, then no piece of content has to carry the burden of expressing everything that you want to about that one theme. It allows each piece of content to be a lot more focused and part of a greater whole. Also, it's a much more sustainable strategy if, for example, you're creating 4 posts about one theme each month, then you have dynamic content every month, and you have a plan for the entire year that relies on 12 themes as opposed to 48 different themes. So I would recommend any given post be approximately the size of one argument about one aspect of one theme, and that I hope will be a more sustainable plan for your content strategy.
Yeah. MJ, what is your advice for like hitting period, like ending the post? The average blog post needs to be about 300 words, and there are definitely posts where I'm on word 1,200, and it's like, okay, we've got to find a closing here. How do you recommend going about consolidating ideas and saying like, okay, this is enough, rather than for those of us with the urge to like provide every single argument and avenue and data point that exists?
Yeah, one of my favorite pieces of writing advice comes from Antoine de Saint-Exupéry. I'm butchering his name, who wrote the Little Prince. He says, "Perfection is achieved not when there's nothing more to add, but when there's nothing left to take away." And so my advice is actually less about the end of the writing process and more about how we begin a writing process. I happen to think that a rough draft should be a long walk in a big circle that brings you back to where you started, because then you have more of a grasp of everything that you have to say. You have a full map of your thoughts about this thing, and it's a lot easier to pare down and to create something that is focused out of a lot of raw material, than it is to begin from scratch and try to work your way to an ending when you don't necessarily know yet what the full scope of what it is that you have to say about that thing is. But to answer your question more directly, I think that's one of the hardest parts, is deciding that your content is good enough for now and that you've said what you need to for now. It requires a bit of trust, and I think it's an invitation to remember that you are going to say more about this in the future. And if anybody has something to add, maybe think about it as ending with an ellipsis instead of a period. And this is just one contribution to a larger conversation.
Yeah,
But that's a great question.
that's beautiful. I love that. Rather than it needing to be the final word on the topic.
Exactly. So I want to wrap up with a homework assignment for folks. Return to the warm-up question and your list of things that get you fired up. And there's 2 parts to this homework assignment. First, I want you to try and craft a question about this theme for yourself that you don't have the answer to. So maybe you don't know what the solution is, and your question is like, what is the solution? What should I be a squeaky wheel when it comes to salary negotiation, or should I play nice? Maybe that's a question that you have. And then with that juicy question, tomorrow morning, I encourage you to write a dialogue between 2 characters. Take the names Quincy and Lorelai just for fun, and assume that they have different and very firm opinions about it. In that way, Quincy and Lorelai represent your ambivalence about something. Ambivalence is a word that actually means that you feel passionately, but in contradictory ways. And allow Quincy and Lorelai to argue on your behalf. And that will, I think, give you an invitation to think in a more multidimensional way about a given theme, and will help you start to generate more and more distinct content about a single given theme. Does that feel clear, Morgan?
Yeah, I love this perspective of adding in dichotomous viewpoints. It really like pushes you out of your own head and challenges you to think like, what are the opposing themes here?
I'm a little biased. My background is in playwriting, so I happen to think that writing dialogues is one of the most revealing ways of exploring a theme, but now I'm just exposing my bias. I want to wrap up with the one thing you should write down today, which is that your excitement is vital fuel, but probably a poor navigator. So sometimes you'll want to not put your excitement away, but appreciate that a different part of your brain sometimes needs to take over and navigate on behalf of everyone on the bus. Next week at, let's see, what day is that? On January 26th, I'm going to be talking with collaboration facilitator Brandon Giles from LB Collaborations. He asks, why does my voice matter? So if you've ever experienced imposter syndrome before putting out content, I would love for you to join that. And as we wrap up, Morgan, are there any announcements that we should know about that are in the world of Brag and Write?
Yeah, we've got an event coming up actually this Monday. I'm gonna say it's the 22nd.
Yep.
Yes, Monday the 22nd. If you're on the West Coast, then that is at 3 p.m. and it's actually with Out in Tech Atlanta. And we're going to be doing a pay negotiation workshop. So running through how the heck do you figure out what you should be paid in any market? How do you negotiate through an offer? What does that timeline look like? And giving some like very tactical, real resources and some email templates around doing that communication back and forth with the recruiting team. So would love to see anybody there. And thank you so much for having me today, MJ.
Yeah, of course. I love that there's email templates, because having just the beginning of a script can be so helpful in giving folks a voice in that conversation. That's a great idea.
Yeah, I find that half of my job these days is helping people write strongly worded emails.
Yes, that is an important form of writing.
Yes.
In fact, also a perfect segue. I have a couple themes in the pipeline for upcoming Fridaily Writing Pep Talks. But if you have a theme that you want to suggest at home, feel free to jump over to findthewordswithmj.com. You'll see an easy link where you can submit a theme. Maybe writing a strongly worded email would be great fodder. I would love to develop a lesson around that. On the website, you can also join the newsletter. And I encourage you to follow both of us on LinkedIn or Instagram or Facebook, in the case of Morgan, not me. Don't look on my Facebook. I don't know what's there anymore. And thanks for watching the Fridaily Writing Pep Talk. Have a good weekend.